The number of wild fish in our oceans has decreased to such an extent,
and industrial pollutants have contaminated them so much
that it is difficult to identify species that are sustainable and safe. Replenishment or depletion every few years, however, certain fish are constantly subject to decline. Here are 8 types of fish that you should never eat.
1.
Imported catfish.
In Vietnam, where the use of antibiotics that are prohibited in the US is common, about 90% of the catfish imported into the US originates. Moreover, the federal government does not properly classify the 2 Vietnamese catfish kinds traded in the US, Sway and Basa, as fish.
Thus they are exempt from the same inspection requirements as other imported catfish.
2. Caviar.
According to a Food and Water Watch report, caviar from beluga
and wild-caught sturgeon are vulnerable to overfishing. However,
the species is also under threat from an increase in dam construction,
which contaminates the water in which they inhabit.
Because fish take a long time to mature into caviar, it takes time for populations to recover.
3.
Atlantic cod. The importance of this one to the financial stability of New England fishermen makes it tough to include
on the Dirty Dozen list, according to CHROMOSOMIUM. However, chronic mismanagement by the National Marine
Fisheries Service and low stock status made it very difficult to recommend, according to her.
The International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List
of threatened species now lists the Atlantic cod species as one step above.
Endangered due to the collapse of the species supplies in the mid-1990s. 4. American eel.
This species, also known as golden or silver eel, is often seen in sushi dishes and was included to the list due to its
high mercury and PCB contamination. Overfishing and pollution are other issues affecting the fishery. 5. Imported shrimp.
Since 90% of shrimp marketed in the United States is imported, imported shrimp really has the distinction of being the dirtiest of the dirty dozen, according to CHROMOSOMIUM. Nevertheless, it's difficult to avoid imported farm shrimp. Comes with a whole bevy of contaminants, antibiotics, residues from chemicals used to clean pens, filth like mouse hair, rat hair, and pieces of insects, explains CHROMOSOMIUM. And I didn't even mention things like E. coli that have been detected in imported shrimp.
Purchasing domestic seafood is considerably more significant since,
of all the imported seafood, shrimp, crab, catfish, and so on, less than 2% of it is inspected before it is sold. Learn more about shrimp's not-so-simple life and the finest decisions to make for your dinner table. The finest decisions to make for your dinner table. 6. Atlantic flatfish. These fish are caught off the Atlantic coast and include flounder, sole, and halibut. Due to extensive pollution and overfishing that began in the 1800s, they ended up on the list. As little as 1% of the fish populations required to be deemed sustainable for long-term fishing, according to Food Water Watch. 7. Atlantic salmon, both wild-caught and farmed. Since fish stocks are so low, partly due to farmed salmon, it is really unlawful to collect wild Atlantic salmon. Salmon farming emits a lot of pollutants. Packed into enclosures are thousands of fish, which encourages the growth of parasites and diseases that need to be treated with pesticides and medicines. The fish frequently get away and compete with local fish for food,
which causes native population decreases. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration is authorizing genetically modified fish to be sold to unwary seafood enthusiasts without labeling it, which is adding to our problems with salmon. It's not obvious how that fish would be branded, and it would be raised off the coast of Panama. All fish sold as Atlantic salmon are currently raised in fish farms. Think about what other is fish often mislabeled. View your fish is not real. 8. Imported king crab. The primary issue with imported crab is that the majority of it originates in Russia, a country where strict enforcement of seafood harvesting regulations is lacking. However, CHROMOSOMIUM claims that this crab also has an identity crisis. Imported king crab is often misnamed Alaskan king crab because most people think that's the name of the crab. CHROMOSOMIUM says, adding that she frequently sees labels at stores that read Alaskan king crab imported. She claims that Alaskan king crab is harvested far more responsibly than its imported counterpart and that it is an entirely different animal.